Good morning and welcome to our study. For those of you at home, we welcome you. If you have your Bible, you want to turn to Judges chapter 18. For those of you here in the congregation this morning, the sanctuary, Judges chapter 18, a slippery slope. Let's pray. Father God, bless our message. Help us to learn something from Micah and the tribe of Dan that we can apply to our life. Be with us, be with the speaker as we attempt to try and figure out what's going on in chapter 18. These things I pray in your name. So I want to talk about a slippery slope. When I was growing up in Seymour, Indiana, we lived a block away from the Farm Bureau. And the Farm Bureau was just a few hundred yards away from the B&O Railroad, which connected Cincinnati to St. Louis. This slope was really neat for us kids to play in the summer. So we'd go to the Farm Bureau, we'd go out to the back where they have the dumping garbage, and we would find these huge, big pieces of cardboard. We'd cut them down and make slides. So in the summer, we'd go up to the top of the railroad track, make sure there were no trains coming, get on board that cardboard and slide down. Now that was fun in the summer. If we were going too fast, we could always just roll over and stop because you're on grass and you could roll down the grass. Well, the same thing we did in the wintertime. The only difference is in the wintertime, when we were going down that slope on cardboard, you can't stop. You just could not stop. It's like you were on ice. Once you got going, you couldn't stop. That's exactly what's going to happen today, and that's why I've titled the lesson, A Slippery Slope. So here's the opening. In Judges chapter 1, going way, way back to Judges chapter 1, many of the 12 tribes were not successful in expelling the enemy from the land that God told Joshua to assign them. When you read Judges 1, Joshua will be telling the people, the tribes, exactly where their land allotment is from God. Many of those tribes were unsuccessful. One of those unsuccessful tribes was Dan. It's in Judges chapter 1, verse 34. The Amorites forced Dan into the hills away from the fertile valley. Tim Keller says Dan needs land. So let's take a look at photo number 1 about the tribe of Dan. Keller says about this tribe, it's easier to find new land than to fight for the land God has given us. Now remember, God tells the people, I'll help you. I'll help you defeat the Canaanites and the Perizzites and the Amorites and the Hittites and so on. I will help you. But apparently Dan figures it's just easier to go on a trek and find new land than to fight for the land God gave us. So Keller asks this question. In your Christian walk, did you ever take the easy way out? Did you ever take the easy walk? I got to confess, I probably did. And my guess is, if we're honest, we've all at some point in time taken the easy way as opposed to standing up and doing the right thing. So let's unpack this slippery slope, which will be photo number 2. The slippery slope is going to begin with Micah. That was the crux of our lesson last week. Then we go to his mom. He stole 1,100 shekels. Mom issues a curse. Micah hears the curse. He returns the money. She says, oh, you are blessed, my son. Thank you for returning the 1,100 shekels. She takes 200 shekels, goes to a coppersmith, silversmith, and has him make a 200 shekel shrine. It then goes to Micah's son. We know he has several sons. It says so in chapter 17. Okay? And he's going to make this son a priest. He doesn't have the authority to do this. Okay? Then the Levite comes on board. 10 shekels a year plus room and board. He's going to be a father and a priest to Micah. Doesn't stop there. Today's lesson is the tribe of Dan. In economics, it's called a multiplier effect. But if you've ever been near a quiet lake, it's just as quiet as can be. It's like the carpet. It's like your tiled home. And you take up a big stone and you throw that in that placid lake, you make a ripple. Well, that's the multiplier effect. So this whole slope starts with Micah. It's going to end with the tribe of Dan. Now Dan. Who was Dan? Okay, he was Jacob's 5th son. His mom was Bilhah, and she was Rachel's maidservant. So Dan was one of the sons of Jacob, son number 5. Now, notice what Jacob said to Dan when he gave him this blessing. If your father ever gave you a blessing, how would you like to have received this blessing? Jacob said of his son Dan, Dan will be a snake by the roadside, a viper along the path that bites horses' heels so that the rider falls off. So just picture a rattlesnake lying there in the ditch, waiting for somebody to walk by, and suddenly, without warning, strikes. That's Dan. We're going to see this snake analogy as we unpack this lesson today, as they will attack a little town called Lash that was not expecting an attack. Okay? Now, Samson is from the tribe of Dan. And as we talk about the migration, as these Danites, as they're called, will migrate some 125 miles north to find new land, not everybody from Dan will go. Samson and his family do not go. So please keep that in mind. We're going to have some people stay in the Dan tribe. We're going to have some people migrate north to create a new land. Okay? Now this new area for Dan, which we'll take a look at in just a minute, it's going to put them up in the northern tribes, the 10 tribes. And these 10 tribes will become very famous in 722 BC when the Assyrians conquer them. Think Nineveh. So let's take a look at the first 10 verses. So if you've got your Bible, Judges chapter 18, verses 1 through 10. In those days, Israel had no king. That's going to come about 4 times in the book of Judges. Israel had no king. And in those days, the tribe of the Danites was seeking a place of their own where they might settle, because they had not yet come into an inheritance among the tribes of Israel. They had not fought the battles and conquered the land God and Joshua had promised. So the Danites sent 5 of their leading men from Zorah and Eshtaol to spy out the land and explore it. These men represented all the Danites. They told them, go, explore the land. So now we're going to take a look at these 5 spies. So they entered the country of Ephraim and came to the house of Micah, where they spent the night. When they were near Micah's house, they recognized the voice of the young Levite. He must have been preaching. He must have been singing. He must have been reading scripture, because they heard him. So I'm guessing he was outside reading, chanting, and they heard him. So they turned in there and they asked him, who brought you here? What are you doing in this place? Why are you here? Verse 4. He told them what Micah had done for him. Well, he hired me 10 shekels a year. I'm going to be father and priest, and I get room and board. He has hired me, and I'm his priest. Then they said to him, the 5 spies, please inquire to God to learn whether our journey will be successful. I mean, the guy's a priest, right? The priest answered him, go in peace. Well, let's stop there for a minute. Do you see any place in verse 6 where this Levite priest from Bethlehem prayed? No. Do we see any place in verse 6 where the priest asks God, what should I tell them? No. He just says, go in peace. Your journey has the Lord's approval. Interesting. So the 5 men left and came to Lash, where they saw that the people were living in safety, like the Sidonians. And we'll take a look at those people in just a minute, at peace and secure. And since their land lacked nothing, they were prosperous. Also, they lived a long way from the Sidonians and had no relationship with anybody else. They were all by themselves. When they returned to Zorah and Eshtaol, the 5 spies, their fellow Danites asked him, how did you find things? What did you find? What did you see? They answered, come on, let's attack. We have seen the land, and it is good. Aren't you going to do something? Don't hesitate to go there and take it over. When you get there, you'll find an unsuspecting people and a spacious land that God has put into your hands, and that land lacks nothing. Okay, so now we're going to take a look at a map so we can get some idea of the geography. Okay, now there you can take a look. Down at the bottom, you can see where their journey starts. Town called Zorah and Eshtaol. They're going to go way up north through Ephraim, about a 125-mile trip. Now, if they can go 20 miles a day, you're talking maybe a 6-day trip for these 5 men. Maybe they could go more than 20, 25 miles. Now, this map doesn't show it. But about halfway along that journey, about 60, 65 miles, to the right is the holy city of Shiloh. That's where the tabernacle was. And that's going to be so important in this story. But these 5 spies make a beeline up to Lash, which they will rename Dan. So I think it's important for us to get a picture of their journey. Okay? It's about 100 and 125 miles. They came to Micah's house. They must have heard him speaking. They must have recognized something about his dialect. They knew that they weren't necessarily from the tribe of Dan. I remember years and years and years ago, Margot and I were in Boston, Massachusetts, and one of the things that I wanted to see was the USS Constitution. It was docked in the Boston Harbor. So we come out of our hotel, I flag down a cab driver, and I say, we want to go to the Boston Harbor. Harbor? The Boston Harbor. Harbor. The Boston Harbor. Harbor. Where the USS Constitution is. The harbor. Oh, I'm in Massachusetts. It's harbor, not harbor. I love the New England and the New York brogue and accent. It sure is different. And I know that my students at the University of West Georgia, and I would always tell them where I was from, and about midway through a semester, somebody would always raise their hand and say, Shep, we know you're a Yankee because you talk so fast. I guess the more I got into a lesson, the faster I talk. And sometimes they'd say, Mr. Shepherd, you need to slow down. You're in the South. I said, okay, thank you. Because I could sometimes get wound up. Okay, but they must have recognized something about this Levite's speech that they asked him where he was from. Okay, now in Numbers chapter 3, verse 5 to 13, it gives the duties of these Levites at the tabernacle, the portable tent of worship, where God would come in the cloud, where the priests were, the holy city. The holy city was in Shiloh, long before Jerusalem. Okay? The Levite probably should have been at Shiloh and not in Micah's house. Now, the Life Application Bible says this about Levites. They're servants. They teach, they conduct the rituals, they care for the tabernacle, and in particular, the Ark of the Covenant, which contained the 10 Commandments. So they've got a very, very important job. And they serve at the tabernacle, or get this, some designated city by the priests. Nowhere, says the Life Application Study Bible, does it say a Levite is to serve as a priest in somebody's house. Matthew Henry says, in this commentary, en route to Lash, they would pass by Shiloh, the holy city. Instead of going there, in Matthew Henry's terms, they seek counsel from an illegitimate priest. In Matthew Henry's Bible commentary, he calls this Levite an illegitimate priest. Pretty strong words, okay? Well, let's take a look at Shiloh. So we're going to go to photo 4, and there's Shiloh. That's the holy city for some 200 years, where the tabernacle was, where the priests were, where God would come in a cloud, where the priests would pray, and offer sacrifices. That was the city to which they should have gone, but they didn't. They were focused on getting up north and finding some place to live. Okay? So, another photo about the tribe of Dan. Dan is going way beyond their assigned land boundaries and way beyond God's plan for them. God never told them, go north. He never told them go north, but they did. So, Keller asked this question. In your life journey, did you ever go on a journey that maybe not was God's plan? Did you ever go down a road that maybe God didn't want you to go down? Maybe. Okay. Well, when you stray beyond God's boundaries, look out, because danger is just around that curve. So the spies are talking to this priest, and they ask to use his oracle, and he asks, "Bless our trip," and he does. So they're asking this illegitimate priest to give a holy blessing. He didn't ask God. All he said was, "Go in peace." So let's take a look at these Sidonians. Okay? Laura's going to show us a map so we can get some idea of who these people were, because they play a very important part in the story. Okay, there you can see the Mediterranean Sea. Way up north is the city of Sidon, S-I-D-O-N, in Phoenicia. World-famous merchants, world-famous seamen, way, way out of the Promised Land. Now, apparently, people living in Sidon moved to Lash. So you've got some Sidonites who stayed at home, but you've got some Sidonites who moved and formed the town of Lash, or later on it'll become Dan. And I think that's important because these people in Sidon practiced many gods. They were wealthy, influential, peaceful. But there's a very famous person who comes from Sidon, and her name, Jezebel. Remember, she marries Ahab and Jezebel, and they're going to take on Elijah. Yeah, that's where she comes from, okay? Lash was not a city to be conquered. When you read the book of Joshua, and it lists all those cities to which the Jews were to go and conquer, Jericho, Ai, never mentions that city. Dan is on a mission of their own choice, and it was certainly not God's choice. Okay? So Dan is way out of line, and we're going to see what's happening. Now, it said the Sidonites living in Lash were highly independent. They had no allies. They had no treaties with nearby nations. They were alone. Now, for some of us, we can remember the 1940s and 1950s. We can remember the end of World War II, or at least we read about it, or studied it in school. Maybe we remember Korea. And shortly after Korea was the Cold War. Stalin had just died in 1953, and here came Khrushchev. So what happened? Well, in 1949, 12 countries formed an organization called NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. There are now 30 countries in NATO. Their purpose was to block the Russians from ever invading Europe. Okay? In 1954, several countries in Southeast Asia formed a treaty called SEATO, S-E-A-T-O, to block any kind of Russian aggression in Southeast Asia. A year later, right in the Middle East, was the Baghdad Pact, sometimes called CENTO, C-E-N-T-O, to block Russian aggression in the Middle East. So you had three of these major alliances. Block them in Europe, block them in the Middle East, and block them in Asia. The Sidonites had none of those. None of those. They were totally alone with no alliance. Now, the United States is still a member of NATO and CETO. CENTO dissolved right around 1975, 1976. But these people living in Lash were probably overconfident, and hence no treaties, no alliances. Now, if you love to study about world history, and in particular, world wars, I would suggest you Google the Maginot Line. M-A-I-G-N-O-T. M-A-I-G-N-O-T. After World War I, the French built this unbelievable, impenetrable line from France to Germany, thinking if the Germans try to cross into France again, at some point in time, they will not get through the Maginot Line. And you can see all kinds of pictures of underground bunkers that protected the French from the Germans. But they had very little protection. Belgium, Netherlands, Luxembourg, the so-called Low Countries. Very, very minimal defense. So when the Germans invaded France, guess what? They did not come across the Maginot Line. They did an in-run and came through the Low Countries, and in 6 weeks, France surrendered. They had their defense in the wrong area. Now, the reason why I'm building this up is this country, this little town, is totally defenseless. They thought they were, but they were not. Okay? So as we move on, the spies say, let's attack. So we're going to take a look at photo number 7. The spies say, let's attack. The Levites said, go we with you. Be careful to whom you listen. They listened to a fake priest. But his words sounded, oh, so good. Did your mom ever tell you, if it looks good, if it sounds good, if it smells good, if it tastes good, it probably is not good, right? But you see, this phony priest, God be with you, God will go with you, you will be successful. The phony priest was right. As we're going to study at the end, they will conquer and subdue that country. So here's what happens. We're going to pick up now in verse 11. Verse 11. Okay? Then 600 men of the Danianites, armed for battle, set out for Zor and Eshtaol. On their way, they set up camp near Kereth-Jearim in Judah, outside Micah's hometown. Okay? This is why the place was Kereth-Jearim is called Mayhem Dan to this day. Enough big words, okay? From there they went on to the hill country of Ephraim, and they came to Micah's house, 600 armed men. Then the 5 spies who had spied out the land of Laish said to their fellow Danites, do you know that one of these houses has an ephod, some household gods, and an image overlaid with silver? Now you know what to do. So they turned in there, and they went to the house of the young Levite at Micah's place and greeted him. The 600 Danites, armed for battle, stood at the entrance of the gate. The 5 men who had spied out the land went inside and took the idol, the ephod, and the household gods, while the priest and the 600 armed men stood at the entrance of the gate. Micah is not home. Priest is outside with 600 armed men. When the 5 men went into Micah's house and took the idol, the ephod, and the household gods, the priest said to them, what are you doing? Now, do you find that question interesting? I mean, they've gone into Micah's house, they're taking all that stuff out and putting it in a U-Haul, and the priest says, what you doing? Duh, right? Okay, I'm making fun of this priest. I'm sorry, all right? They answered him, be quiet. Don't say a word. Come with us and be our father and priest. That sound familiar from last week? Hey, come with us. Be our father and priest. Isn't it better that you serve a tribe and a clan in Israel as priest rather than just one man's household? The priest was very pleased. Translate that, the priest was very flattered. He took the ephod, the household gods, and the idol and went along with the people. Putting their little children, their livestock, and their possessions in front of them, they turned away and left. So you've got the idols, the cattle, the kids, and the women, and then you've got the 600 men. They're moving slowly, okay? When they had gone some distance from Micah's house, the men who lived near Micah, his neighbors, were called together and overtook the Danites. Well, the Danites are going slow, okay? As they shouted after them, the Danites turned and said to Micah, what's the matter with you, that you called out your men to fight us? Notice Micah's answer. You took the gods I made and my priest, and you went away. What else do I have? How dare you ask? What's the matter with you? The Danites turned and answered, don't you argue with us, or some of my men may get angry and attack you, and your family will lose your lives. So the Danites went away, and Micah, this is kind of sad, I think, seeing that they were too strong for him, turned and went back home. He turned and he went back home. So this ephod they're talking about, we've seen that picture on several lessons. That's that linen garment that the priest wears over his chest. It was used for divination, for divine prayer. So when the priest was asked a question, he would take his hands and hold on that ephod and pray to God, asking for direction, asking for an answer to prayer. So when they saw that, they thought, we got to get that. That's holy stuff. We need that. Okay? Micah's not home. When he finds out what happens, he chases them. Okay? Now we're going to go to photo 8. Photo 8, because this is what the army is going to say to the priest. Hey, Levi, why serve just one man? And Micah, and his mom, and his sons. When you can serve an entire tribe, our tribe will follow you and will obey you as father and priest. Those are exact words that Micah told the priest in last Sunday's lesson. Come into my house, be my father, and be my priest. Is this a tempting offer? I think the priest is flattered. Now imagine this story. You're a preacher. You're a preacher's wife. You've got a small congregation. On a good Sunday, 40, 50 people. But you love them. They love you. But every once in a while, you go onto a web page and you take a look at the big churches, the mega churches, and you take a look and see if there is a vacancy. Now, back when I was young, in the 70s and 80s, in our little church of community, we had what was known as pulpit committees. You may recall that term. I don't think it's used anymore because of technology. All we could do was, if we were looking for a preacher, we would advertise in the Christian Standard or the Lookout, which was the two magazines that came out weekly for the independent Christian churches and churches of Christ, advertising, Community Christian Church, Frankfort, Indiana, seeking minister. Contact Ron Shepard, Chuck Bergen, Charlie Dunn. Then they would call. Today, of course, a preacher, somebody looking for a change of pulpits, can go on a website and send a sermon, not by videotape, but by YouTube or a USB port or what have you, and the resume can be electronically sent. But I can recall in the 70s serving on 2 pulpit committees, going into churches looking for a prospect, and we stuck out like a sore thumb. Now remember, now Leah Ellis is going to appreciate this big time. This is the 70s. So we would always have 1 elder and 3 deacons, and we always had on coat and ties. And we would walk into these churches and sit in the back. Red flag, pulpit committee, red alert. And that's exactly what happened. And we'd sit there and thinking, oh my goodness. That's what we did. That's all we knew. Didn't have technology. Today now, it's all done virtually. Some people used to call that robbing the church of its minister. You would hear tales of a minister down the road in a big church. And for 3 or 4 years when he's been there, the congregation doubled, tripled. You know what would happen? Pulpit committees would raid that church. I kid you not. That's how we did it back in Indiana. Now, I don't know about Georgia, so I'm beating up on myself, okay? But imagine going on a website, finding a mega church They ask you to send some information, resume, letters of references, people to contact, and a couple of sermons. And 3 weeks later, you get a phone call, a text from the elders saying, we'd love for you to come to the Church of the Good Shepherd. We're averaging 1,000 people. Here's what we can pay you, plus insurance. Oh, and by the way, you see that house next door? That's your parsonage. We'll provide you with a car. Is that flattery enough to leave that little small church of 50 people and go to a mega church? Folks, listen to me. I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm saying it happens. It happens. I think what these Danites did, they used flattery for that priest. And he bought into it. Why should I be a priest of Micah and his mom? His mom gets on my nerves. And his 2 sons, when I could be the priest of an entire tribe. Is it tempting? Is it flattery? Well, let's do something secular. So Laura is going to pull up photo number 9. This is one of my favorite all-time films. I showed it every year at Frankfurt High School in senior government. It stars Michael Douglas as president, and I know you're going to laugh at this, as President Andrew Shepard. That's his name in the film. And then Annette Bening. Now, Annette Bening in this film, she's a lobbyist. And she's lobbying the president to vote for a particular bill. Now, the background is the president is a widower. His wife had died a few years ago of cancer. Okay? And he sees this lobbyist, and they begin to talk and begin to develop a relationship. So he invites her to a presidential ball. To a presidential ball. And there's going to be diplomats and ambassadors and foreign dignitaries. This is their first date. And as he's coming down the stairs from the White House, he asks his daughter, I haven't had a date in 3 years since your mom died. I don't know what to say or what to do. And here's what his daughter said to him. This is a classic scene. Dad, just tell her, I like your shoes. I love your shoes. Those are beautiful shoes. And so as he meets Annette, right before they go into the ballroom, he says, oh, I love your shoes. And the look on her face, her eyes glow, she smiles. We see the beginning of a relationship. He's using flattery, and I think that's exactly what happened to this priest. And I guess my warning to you and me is, be careful of those people who flatter us, right? So we move on. The neighbors catch up with them. Why are you here? Go home or we'll kill you. So he goes home. So he goes home. So let's read the conclusion. Okay, verse 27. Then they took what Micah had made and his priest and went to Laish against the people at peace and secure. They attacked them with the sword and burned down their city. There was no one to rescue them because they lived a long way from Sidon and they had no relationship, no NATO, no CETO, no CENTO with anybody. The city was in a valley near Beth Rabbon. The Danites rebuilt the city and settled there. They named it Dan after their ancestor Dan, who was born to Israel, though the city used to be called Laish. Then, now get this, the tribe of the Danites set up for themselves the idol. Drum roll. And Jonathan, finally, after 30 verses, in last Sunday's lesson, we learn who the fake priest is. And Jonathan, son of Gershom, the son of Moses, which means this fake priest is what relationship to Moses? Grandson. We're going to take a look at that in just a minute, okay? They continued to use the idol Micah had made all the time the house of God. All the time the house of God was in Shiloh. So, photo number 10, finally we learn the Levite's name, Jonathan. And Keller says this, so much for genealogy. So much for genealogy. So we go to photo 11. We started out on a slippery slope. Okay? A downward spiral of Dan is complete. And when you read Revelation 7, 5 to 8, it talks about the 12 tribes of Israel standing around the throne. Manasseh, 12,000. Judah, 12,000. Benjamin, 12,000. Guess what? Dan does not make Revelation 5. The tribe of Dan is omitted from those 12 tribes that stand around the throne of God in heaven. Revelation 7, 5 to 8. So we're going to go to the last photo, the takeaways. You know, Randy's always talking about a takeaway, so here's some possible takeaways from Tim Keller. 1, everyone is a worshiper of something. But what or who is it? And does it give us meaning? Do you agree with that? We all worship something. We all worship somebody. Okay. 2, do not be like the tribe of Dan and pursue your own life's journey. You'll get snake bit. Jonathan, I love this phrase from Keller. God has no grandchildren. God has no grandchildren. And when you talk about genealogy and kinfolk, what was the name of Moses' brother who slipped away and made that golden calf at the foot of Mount Sinai? What was Moses' brother's name? Aaron. Just because they were brothers was no guarantee Aaron at that point was going to be a follower. Okay? One generation knows the gospel. The next generation assumes it. The third loses it. That's got to be a stab in the back for parents and grandparents. You take your kids to church, to Sunday school, VBS. You take them to parties. In our church, maybe trunk or treat, or Christmas parties. You get them involved in church, vacation Bible school. You take them to camp. Maybe you even take them to Bible colleges, Johnson or Milligan or someplace like that, because you want them to grow up in the church, knowing and learning. One generation knows the gospel. The next assumes it. The third loses it. So let me tell you, if you have grandchildren or children born after 1996, they are in what is now called Generation Z. We've run out of letters in the alphabet. Generation Z, born from 1996 until today. What are they facing? Uncertainty. If you have children or grandchildren in Generation Z, what they're facing is the unknown. COVID, the economy, and who knows what else. That's what your grandchildren and your nephews and nieces and young children are facing. Generation Z could be a tough road to hoe. Okay? And Keller goes on to say, you know what? And this is to Micah. It's also to you and me. We may meet people who are stronger, wiser, bolder, luckier than we are, and they take away our gods, our career, our status, our wealth, possessions, authority, and successes. When they do, what do we have left? Here's what I think happened. Micah goes home alone. He's thinking, I'm going back home to Mom, my sons, an empty house, because my shrine is all gone. I think Micah thinks his hope was built on sinking sand. That's how we're going to close. I think Micah's hope was based on fake idols, which he made, and a fake priest, which he hired. The Christian's hope, which, by the way, the choir sang today, the audience sang today, the Christian's hope is based on a person. So I close with this, 1834. We're in West Sussex, England, south of England. The guy's name, Edward Mote, M-O-T-E, a Baptist preacher. Here's what he wrote, and here's what we sang. My hope is built on nothing less than Jesus' blood and righteousness. I dare not trust the sweetest frame, but wholly lean on Jesus' name. On Christ, the solid rock, I stand. All other ground, Micah, is sinking sand. All other ground, Ron, church, is sinking sand. For me, that's what I've learned from the tribe of Dan on a slippery slope. God, I pray we will not be like Dan. I pray we will not be like Jonathan, a fake priest. But I pray that we will have a relationship with the Savior and that we will stand on a firm foundation, on a solid rock, and not on sinking sand like Micah did. May that be one of the lessons that we've gleaned today, is my prayer in your name. Amen.